back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements.
And Chris is
calling
on assignment.
in from some undisclosed private location.
So,
hey, Sean, how are you?
Good. How are you, Rick? Chris?
How's the weather?
It's a little toasty.
All I can say is much cooler where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, why would you be out of town if you weren't somewhere cooler?
Oh, my goodness.
It wouldn't make sense. Headed out ourselves. Last chance before the kids go to school, since school starts so freaking early.
Yes, your guys started like first week of August?
Yes, August 5th, maybe 6th. I don't know. It's ridiculous.
Oh, geez.
It's ridiculous.
But there's so much to talk about.
Yes. So last we talked was right before President Trump gave his speech at the RNC, his acceptance speech. The first 20 minutes or so, obviously, as everyone who watched it knows, was fairly riveting. You know, discussion about being shot. And then it shifted to what I would call a toned-down version of a rally speech.
Yeah, and he got some criticism for that. And I guess I have a contrarian view a little bit of that.
Okay.
Let the man speak.
After
what he's been through over the last week and certainly the last even 18 months with the lawfare that we've covered pretty extensively on this podcast, let the man speak. Let him say whatever he wants to say.
I don't disagree.
90 minutes. I mean, that in and of itself was quite the triumph.
Well, I mean,
Joe Biden could never speak for 90 minutes. I don't think Kamala Harris could speak for 90 minutes.
Not coherently.
Coherently.
Nobody was obligated to keep the TV on, and if you were in the hall, you could walk out. It's not like anyone was held captive. Except the reporters who have to report on it. So maybe they're the ones who are bitter, which is why they talk about it that way. But I thought it was, fine. I mean, look, the most important part was the first 20 minutes. I think that, most people probably don't listen much more than 20 minutes. So he got across what he wanted. And as that was happening, the Democrats were continuing to do their thing to undermine their president. And it all came to a head on Sunday afternoon.
When the knives really came out.
Yeah. And, he put out now, what's kind of wild to me is that he wrote a letter, which apparently he called his senior staff and read them the letter and then released it on Twitter immediately. So his senior staff gets a written but read statement from the president rather than him just, hey, guys, I'm out. He reads them the letter, which I find bizarre.
Which obviously he didn't write. I mean,
no, it was Ricchetti, and Ricchetti talked about writing it. I mean, it's Steve Ricchetti, and then it gets put out, and 30 minutes later, he puts out another tweet statement that says that he's endorsing Kamala Harris. Now, there were a lot of criticism from people.
Whoops, I left that out of the letter.
Well, no,
Sorry.
but see, I totally get that, and let me explain this from a very personal experience. And some of you, a lot of the listeners won't know this, but when I worked for John Shadegg in 2008, it was January of 2008, he had decided that he was going to retire from Congress. And, he really wrestled with that question. And so as a part of that conversation, it was, I expressed interest in running for a seat. He wanted to endorse me. It'd be a pass the torch type of thing, blah, blah, blah. I looked at it from the continuation, Goldwater to Shadegg to me. And I was very excited about that. So he announces his retirement. He puts out a statement, and the phone calls flood in. And our press secretary, Abby Winter, at the time, fields all these phone calls for him. And then she starts getting a round of phone calls for me because most reporters kind of thought, well, is Sean going to run? And when reporters would ask Shadegg, okay, so are you going to support Sean or who are you going to support? He wouldn't answer the question. And I was kind of baffled by that. I was like, well, we talked about how you were going to endorse me. And, 3 hours into the announcement, I'm already hearing about all these people who are jumping in.
See, this is in the weeds stuff for our listeners. This is great.
So I'm like, I've got to get a statement out, but I want to do it with you. And then, a couple hours goes by and she's still taking, and at one point he comes in, he's like, is she your press secretary or is she my press secretary? I was like, okay, all right, I got it. And upon reflection, I realized that I had no business being in the conversation about his announcement leaving Congress. This was about him. It wasn't about me. And, the reporters were always, oh, we got the news, you're leaving. Oh, what's next? Okay, that's fine. They can ask that question, but he had no business saying anything more than what he wanted to say about his decision and what he was doing in Congress and how it was leaving. And I took offense at it and then realized that I was totally in the wrong. And so Joe Biden, who has been at this for 50 plus years, was doing something that has never, has literally never been done, leaving this late in a cycle to leave the presidency. And there's no way he was going to put in the statement that he was endorsing somebody because it was about him. And I totally get that. So I don't fault him.
That's a great perspective.
I don't fault him at all. I know he's taken a lot of grief for that. Oh, he didn't even know that he was endorsing Kamala. Yes, he did.
Well,
but he wanted to keep it about him. And the fact that he did it 30 minutes later, all right, that's sooner than I would have done it. I mean, he could have waited a day. But boy, she moved fast. She moved fast.
Now there are reports coming out that there's a lot of animosities still between the two, that the knives have been out for a while. And it's going to be interesting to see. You're going to have the Kamala camp, you're going to have the Biden camp, and how things are going to transpire over the next several months. If Joe Biden does indeed remain the president, at least in body, it's coming out now that so much has been orchestrated over the last 3 years that it's hard to believe he was president at all. I saw a report that CNN is really, letting go of the goods in terms of that. It's just that everything's been orchestrated. Everything's been orchestrated behind the scenes. This in and of itself has probably been in the planning for some time. So let's not kid ourselves. And it'll be interesting to see how Joe moves forward with Kamala, at the top of the ticket while he's finishing out his last few months as our president.
Yeah,
whatever that looks like.
Yeah, right.
I can't imagine it's going to look like much.
Well, the only the most recent historical precedent for that, from the standpoint of saying you're not going to run, would be Lyndon Johnson, but he did that in March, so it was before the primary process was already done. And so look, if you are someone who is, we've got to protect democracy, I don't know how you can support what the Democrats have done, because and
yet everyone is getting on board. Everyone's sort of there.
I mean,
except for the Obamas. The Obamas have stayed on the sidelines.
Yeah,
so it's interesting. Does that bring into play your prediction?
So I hope not.
How does this play into your prediction?
Well, I believe that Trump can beat Kamala. So I remain, until Obama endorses her, I remain concerned that this is not done. Because, when I said that I thought that they were going to put Michelle on the ticket in order to protect democracy, it was when I believed that they were serious about what they were saying and that they wanted to hold on to power under any circumstance at all.
That's true.
It's clear that many were saying protect democracy was just a saying. Maybe some believe it, but they can't really believe it if they've done this. If they really believed it, they would have.
Pelosi power broking at its best.
Well, yeah, right? And I mean, the fact that they went they did this after the primary process was done. Yeah, this is oligarchy stuff, man.
Well, when they knew for the better part of a year, maybe more, and now, like I said, everything's coming out that his mental capacity was severely diminished, and they still went through it anyway. And I think they made a big bet. Their big bet, like we said before, was the lawfare. That was their big bet. They thought that they would get further along, and Trump would be so tarnished, and they certainly, hopefully, you don't want to go down that conspiracy route for sure, but they never thought that there would be an attempted assassination of Donald Trump.
Right.
Unless somebody did.
Speaking
of, let's not even go there.
Yeah. Speaking of, finally, the head of the Secret Service resigned today.
Well, I mean,
literally 9, 10 days. How many days has it been? It was the 13th.
Is she going to go back to guarding Doritos?
10 days ago.
Do we know?
Who knows?
What a great line, by the way.
Yeah.
What an awesome line. And that questioning yesterday by, I think, both sides of the aisle. I think Congress actually redeemed itself in some sort of way. Yes, yesterday with both sides really hammering her. Ro Khanna, I mean, thank you. I mean, everybody kind of came to play, and she had no leg to stand on. And I think it was, I'm going to have to fire you, or else it's all sorts of heads are going to roll.
Yeah,
so resign.
It was the most amazing bipartisan hearing I've seen in a very long time.
We haven't seen something like that in quite some time.
When you have Nancy Mace and AOC basically saying the exact same thing, you know something is amiss. And thankfully,
Nancy Mace was ruthless.
Yeah, and Ro Khanna was. I mean, Raskin, Ranking Member Raskin, and Chairman Comer, at the end of it, coming together saying, "We're jointly calling on you to resign. This is just not acceptable." Thank goodness that she.
Well, it's a recognition that this was Donald Trump, and people have their feelings about Donald Trump on both sides of the aisle, but you can't have a presidential candidate an attempted assassination on anyone,
right?
Especially with the lapses that they have. Well, so if somebody can do this to Donald Trump, why can't they do this to Kamala or to Joe Biden?
Right.
Or to Barack Obama
and I think,
or to George W. Bush.
And I think the Democrats probably understood. Wait a minute. Because one of the things that we definitely understand, because we don't know all the motives from the shooter, but one of the things that seems to be
know nothing about the shooter.
But one of the things that seems to be out there is that this guy was just a disturbed attention seeker. What little we've known about what he typed on Steam, we talked about this before. This was more John Hinckley, less political.
Less
statement.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yes.
CIA operative.
Right. Yeah.
Trained CIA.
But I thought it was a great question somebody asked. Do you remember what happened to Stewart, the head of the Secret Service, the day after Reagan was shot? She said, something like he went back to work. He's like, no, he resigned. Yeah. And the fact that the Secret Service director under Obama, when you had the breach of the White House grounds and the security guard get on the elevator, she resigned. I mean, this was a catastrophic failure, period. Full stop. She needed to resign literally that day, as you pointed out on our last podcast. So,
well, I don't know how you can't, unless you think you're so well protected by your DEI, governance that exists in the government right now. How can you not resign? Just out of self-respect is the greatest, security failure since Reagan was shot.
Yeah.
And as you rightfully pointed out, that Social Security director resigned that day.
Yeah. It did. Right.
What makes, in her mind, what makes her so special? She's friends supposedly with Joe Biden. Wow. Okay, great.
Big deal. I mean, if
but
this
the Bidens were going to protect her,
if this had been Biden that had been shot, I gotta believe she would have resigned the next day.
Of course.
So.
Of course, but because it was Trump,
I guess,
and
it's disgusting.
It still defies explanation. I mean, I made a comment to somebody the other day that there was an old TV show in the 70s called SWAT, And if you ever watched that show, like you and I probably did, you would know that the building 100 yards away probably should be covered by people,
Yeah.
ready to fire at somebody who's going to threaten the president.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think last episode we predicted that
It was so long ago.
that Biden would not last the week. We
You
were right.
you predicted the weekend. You thought that after the speech, the pressure would build so much, the polling and everything else and he would bail.
Well, and there's a piece of information that's been reported by Politico that we didn't know, which does lend some fascination to the inside game, and that is Ricchetti and Donnellan went to Rehoboth. Ricchetti went on Friday. Donnellan got there Saturday to walk through internal polling, and apparently, this was the first internal polling conducted by the Biden campaign in a number of months.
Yeah.
The campaign itself had not done any polling in these swing states for months. So when Biden was saying to Lester Holt and to Stephanopoulos, when Stephanopoulos said, well, I've never seen anybody with your approval rating get elected. He's like, well, that's not what our numbers say. Those numbers were from months before.
Yeah.
He didn't have real data.
Well, it shows how insulated he was completely by his staff, that he was working off of things that they were just feeding him.
But the fact that they weren't running a real campaign, I mean, I don't know how you run a campaign at that level without some type of monthly check-in on the polling. It just seems so bizarre.
What does David Schweiker call that? Big boy polling?
Yeah,
big boy polling.
So they did some big boy polling. They took it to him at Rehoboth, and they said, you have no path. I mean, there is no path.
And yet, what does their polling say about Kamala? Because
Kamala's
her approvals are not much better than his.
No, they're not. But look, this changes the dynamic, and this is one thing that I definitely wanted to get to today. And so this is a great segue. Thank you, Chris, for again providing the perfect segue for us to continue a smart conversation for our listeners and for our own edification.
Yes.
So, this is going to be a dogfight, and what it does is it changes what the makeup of the different coalitions look like. So Biden's, winning coalition in 2020 was a lot of the working class people that Trump had appealed to in 2016 that were a little bit squeamish about Trump's temperament. He definitely skewed older. So a lot of the old folks are like, oh, Trump is a little bit too much. I don't like this kind of politics. I like traditional politics. Biden ran as kind of the traditional, I'm going to be the adult in the room. I'm a normal candidate. I'm a moderate. So people who were Republicans who didn't like Trump were voting for Biden. Think of Jeff Flake, Cindy McCain, those, for here in Arizona.
They were also promised something.
Well, look, they were leaning that way because Joe Biden to them was kind of the middle of the road guy that was an adult that was going to bring unity back to the United States, right? And so that was, kind of the coalition that Biden had built, Union, those guys. So then he gets into office and he still has some of that coalition, but it's starting to break off because, working class people, the inflation is just like, oh, this is killing us. So that starts peeling off. So he starts losing pieces of his coalition.
Well, he does
Trump.
Two things right off the bat. One, he signs executive orders basically decimating Trump's approach to the border,
right?
Ending remain in Mexico and just opening the border clear wide, which takes away jobs from Americans,
right?
Letting people in the country taking low-paying, regular jobs away from hardworking Americans. Number one. Number two, then they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the biggest misnomer in probably congressional history. $2 trillion inflation is not transitory. It goes through the roof.
Yep.
And basically it's a massive, massive tax increase on the middle class. And that's what now is leading to a new coalition of working class, both Hispanic and African Americans and white working class, leaning heavily, running towards Donald Trump.
Right. So what does Kamala coming on top of the ticket now do? Well, it probably slows down and maybe even reverse some of the African American drift towards Trump.
Not amongst men.
Maybe not with men. I mean, it's yet to be seen. Probably doesn't do much on the Hispanic front. It might do something for the Asians. You know, because she's Indian, and so East Asian. So there's going to be some, piece that's interesting to watch there. But old people, that were kind of the moderate, like Joe Biden's the adult in the room. She's not getting those people. They're definitely they're going to go either RFK, or they're going to stay home, or they're going to leave the ballot blank, or they're going to vote for Trump. But they're not voting for Kamala Harris.
There's excellent lead editorial in the Wall Street Journal today that I'll post on our LinkedIn, which is what Kamala believes, and basically lays out her entire approach to progressive Democrat policies, California progressive Democrat policies that she has pursued since she was elected as United States Senator. And it is far left of anything Joe Biden has ever proposed, including eliminating ICE, including eliminating private health insurance for 150 million Americans. Donald Trump, I mean, he'll take his shots at Kamala, and I think he needs to be careful in that regard. But on policy, if Joe Biden remains the president for the next 3 months, it's still a viable target. All the policies that have been not only enacted by this administration that she has to now stand up for, but what she wants to do in the future, which is pretty scary.
Well, the stuff that she wants to do in the future is significantly worse than what they've already done. And they've already done a lot of damage. This is the most progressive Democrat that we've ever seen on the top of a presidential ticket. I mean, it is the most extreme candidate on the top of a presidential ticket ever. Way more extreme than Goldwater was on the right in 1964. Way more extreme than Trump. Trump's not even close to that extreme. I mean, the guy is rejecting Project 2025, which good for him. There's some pretty crappy stuff in there. But the point is that...
But Project 2025 is a blueprint, and I don't... It's a think tank thing. And he's right.
It's a wish list. I mean, his platform is what the RNC passed, that Agenda 47, whatever.
They've been doing stuff like this for years, so I don't think it's a misnomer, and they're trying to hang it around Trump, and they're failing because nobody knows what it is. No one's going to read a 900-page document.
No, nobody cares. Nobody cares what think tanks put out. The average Joe doesn't matter. I care, you care, but we're not normal.
She also, I just want to make this point because I saw the latest letter by our friend Brian Birch of Catholic Vote. She also is the most anti-Catholic, anti-Christian candidate that we've ever had running for office.
Yes. I mean, she is the, you think of all the crappy stuff that comes out of California, and she's it. Now, I get to be personal again. It's second time in this episode.
Oh, wow.
So I have a personal experience with Kamala.
You do? Kamala.
So
she is quite the chameleon.
Yeah.
She portrays herself one way, and she's totally different.
Well,
when it comes
sometimes
to
she doesn't portray herself one way. I mean, she's pretty progressive. So, and she is very, very anti-speech. And let me explain. When she was the Attorney General in California, I was obviously involved in dark money. Yeah.
Really?
Shocking. I know.
Wow.
How did
was
we get
that
the title
around
of
the
this?
time I was involved in light beer?
Light beer? Yes, it was.
Perhaps.
And as a part of that, so this is, and this is what's so wild about when you talk about this stuff that's totally legal and normal and everybody does it. But when you do it at a certain level, all of a sudden it becomes nefarious, right? So there are 2 ballot initiatives in California. This is 2012. one was a pro-union and one was a tax increase. And I had some people come to me and said, hey, you know, the rules in California are if you're a C4 and you want to give money to a ballot initiative, you can only do it once. And we don't have any C4s that can give. Can you use your C4s to give? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Because when under IRS rules, a nonprofit like what I had, a C4, can give to a ballot initiative, and that counts as issue advocacy. And it allows you to have more of a cap for what's called express advocacy. Express advocacy is when you actually do something that says vote for or vote against. You know, you're acting in an express electoral capacity. But you can't do any more than 50% of your budget for that. So that's why there's a cap. So when people say we needed to, you know, we want to increase our express advocacy cap, you know, you have to spend money on things that are not express advocacy. Well, giving to a ballot initiative does that. And so we moved $14 million to California so that we could get $7 million in express advocacy because we were in the process of doing campaigning on behalf of Mitt Romney against Barack Obama in the presidential campaign. Well, Jerry Brown, the governor at the time, and Kamala Harris, who was the AG, saw this money come in, and they freaked out because they wanted these ballot initiatives to pass. And so they came after me. And they used all the tools of the government to try to, you know, basically shut me down.
Like a badge of honor.
They wanted to expose the donors and all this other garbage.
Oh, yeah.
So I was in a battle with Kamala Harris for almost 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
And so I know how much of a progressive she is because she couldn't stand the idea that someone would come in and campaign against a tax increase and campaign against pro-union policies.
Yeah.
She wanted to literally use law enforcement, the power of lawfare, to try to shut us up and shut us down.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah.
So do I think Kamala Harris is a good person? No, I do not.
Well, and Vice President word salad, you know, will be a gift that keeps on giving. I think the dynamics of her as a candidate are not going to change no matter how much lipstick they put on the pig.
Well, yeah, she is not a great campaigner. I mean, it is pretty amazing when you think about it. She is the presumptive Democrat nominee for president, and she has yet to have actually gotten one delegate. When she ran for president, she dropped out before Iowa.
Well, and you know who forced that dropout, where she got torpedoed, is now the new darling of the right, Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard.
In that debate, she took it to Kamala. That nobody. It was almost like nobody touched Kamala. Nobody challenged her on anything. And Tulsi, to her credit, you know, turned the tables on her. She had no good response. And that's the other thing when in debates, in matters of policy, when she is openly challenged, when she is openly when somebody actually has an argument against her argument, she backs off.
Yeah,
she's not very secure in her beliefs. She's just a mouthpiece for the powers that be. And right now, everyone's saying that the Clintons are really behind her. Tulsi made that comment the other day in one of her posts that this is just a Hillary Clinton play for the presidency.
Well, I mean, the Clintons were right out of the box endorsing her within minutes.
And that's one of the reasons why perhaps the Obamas are holding their fire.
Maybe. This will be interesting to watch. So let's assume, because she's going to be working under the assumption. I mean, she's raised a boatload of money. She secured the delegates.
A lot of that money was on the sidelines, not doing anything. So,
well, right, but I'll give her credit. I mean, she raised $81 million. I mean, that's a lot of money. Whether it's on the sidelines or not, that's a lot of money. I'm going to give her credit for that.
Elon Musk is giving $45 million a month.
Yeah,
to Trump.
That's fine.
So,
but the Hollywood guys dropped $150 million into the super PAC for her. You know, so she's at 231 without even get the nomination.
Which further emphasizes that this was all planned,
Maybe.
all orchestrated.
Probably.
I believe it was.
But the point is that we have to take her seriously. I mean, the Republicans have to take this seriously because she is going to appeal to people who probably were not going to vote. You know, you look at the double haters, they were probably going to stay home. Now you have a situation where our guy is the old guy. He's now the oldest Republican or oldest presidential nominee in history.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, all right. But he's proven himself to be pretty with it.
In his own words, took a bullet for democracy.
Right.
I thought that was brilliant.
But it will be interesting. So she's so hard core leftist progressive. So she is a progressive Democrat down the line. I mean, everything. It is. Yes. It is. Her positions are completely out of the mainstream. So the question becomes, what does she do with her vice presidential pick? Who does she pick? And the short list that everyone's been talking about, I'm not exactly sure where it came from, but it's Andy Beshear, governor of Kentucky. It's Roy Cooper, governor of North Carolina. It's Gretchen Whitmer, who's actually taken herself out of it. She said she wasn't interested in being vice president. You've got Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania. That's a Hamas problem because he's very Jewish.
Well, I mean, Ben Shapiro on his show earlier today was saying that the Democrats absolutely have voiced their opinions against him for whatever reason because of that Hamas problem.
Yeah. And then you've got Mark Kelly here in Arizona. So the only senator that's been discussed.
Where is Mark Kelly?
Guess what? The Arizona Republic yesterday, the Arizona Republic wrote a story with a headline that said, "Where is Mark Kelly?" I mean, it's as if they've been listening to the podcast.
Yeah, we're letting you know where he is because we know that you're wondering.
Apparently, he's been in Europe. So,
well, I mean,
at air shows.
Ben Domenech on his article in the Spectator today, I believe, was saying that Mark Kelly was probably the best pick for the Democrats, given his status as an astronaut veteran. Definitely a purple swing state that Arizona's become. But I mean, there's also the intangibles that we're speaking about right now. He is probably the most inconsequential senator that Arizona has ever had. He just doesn't go and do anything. He doesn't really show up at anything. He's not active in anything.
I mean, we haven't seen him
versus Kirsten, who's sort of everywhere.
I mean, she's been a leader.
And then of course, which is not reported with any regular basis here in the great state of Arizona, he doesn't really live here anymore. And there's reasons for that. There's probably some medical reasons for that. They're not disclosed, but it's one of the reasons why he's never here. Well, and so it's a big problem. And the other fact is that as a retail politician, he's one of the worst. Well, I mean, Kamala has her cackle, but he just doesn't have a personality.
Yeah, I highly doubt that Mark Kelly is going to be. I could be totally wrong about this because I can't get in the mind of Kamala. That's for sure. But look, if I was them, so you already know where I am.
Yeah, here we go.
If I was them, it would be Michelle, not Kamala, because that's a much easier path to victory against Trump than Kamala. But if you're going to go with Kamala, why isn't it Kirsten Sinema?
Oh, wow.
I mean,
because the base is really turned on.
What are they going to do?
Obviously.
They're going to vote against Kamala? No, because she's a progressive Democrat. But if you want to actually round out your ticket and pull in some of the business community, some of the never Trumpers that were the double haters. I mean,
well, that would be an interesting
I don't want to give her good ideas,
but I don't see that happening.
If I were them, that's what I would do because that immediately puts Arizona in the Democrat column, likely. And it also has impact in other swing states, Nevada.
Well,
I mean, Georgia. It would be earth-shattering. And yes, the progressive aspects of the party would howl and moan and whine, but they're not going to walk away from Kamala.
It would be a great ticket. But I think a Josh Shapiro, that would be my pick. I think the Democrats right now have an anti-Semitic problem, They've got an Israel problem today. Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington D.C. Neither President Trump nor Kamala Harris greeted him at the airport. They're not meeting with him until excuse me, yeah, excuse me, Vice President Harris, President Biden. Neither one of them greeted him at the airport, and that just doesn't show well. I think of Josh Shapiro, who's must win Pennsylvania, must win, and with Trump's attempted assassination there a week ago, that I would think that state is trending Trump much stronger now, and that would be a better pick than any of the others. But they're not going. She's not going to do it.
Well, so it's interesting. I think we both have what I would call really solid ideas, and thankfully they won't follow those ideas.
What do we know?
Because what we're pointing out, and I want people to understand this. We're not saying, "Oh, I wish it was cinema." Whereas I'm saying that would be smart on their part, and I'm afraid of that. That's why, when people say, "Well, I can't believe that you'd want Michelle Obama to be the Democrat." No, I don't want Michelle Obama to be the Democrat nominee. I desperately don't want that. That's why I say it, because I'm scared to death. That's the thing that frightens me the most about Republicans losing would be Michelle Obama. But if they're not going to do that, let her pick.
It was instructive to our listeners.
Let her pick Mark Kelly. You know what, Kamala? If you're listening, pick Mark Kelly. Pick Mark Kelly.
And maybe you can answer where he's been the last several years.
Well, you know what? If he's the vice presidential nominee, we'll know where he is because he can't disappear.
He can't hide. But I mean, I think, despite the coronation that is going to be happening over the next week leading up to their convention and everything that will be going on.
It's 3 weeks. I mean, we're going to get, it's going to be glowing coverage for.
Yeah. But I think there's going to be a lot more strife on the sidelines than the press, the adoring press is going to let on. And that's going to bubble up into the campaign once they get past the convention.
Well,
because the intangibles of Kamala Harris, 90% of her staff is turned over since she's been vice president. 90%. She has to report, because she's essentially the secretary of the Senate. She has to report those numbers back to the Senate in terms of her turnover. 90% of her staff have left, including the world's worst press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, who was her chief of staff, who was tired of the abuse, the verbal abuse from her boss, and left.
Oh, wow. Well,
so none of those intangibles change.
Well, right. And it is, there's going to be, so I'm telling you, Pete, folks, you're going to see polling. She's going to be up.
Oh, yeah.
She's going to get a bounce. There's going to be no Republican post-convention bounce. The drama of the last 3 weeks has just been just earth-shattering and historic. So there is no conventional, like, this is the way things happen.
She is unburdened by what has been.
Yeah, right. So
she is unburdened by Biden, who was thin when he wasn't.
Right. She's been unburdened by Biden. So she's going to have a honeymoon period, and the press and the numbers are going to probably reflect some of that, but it's going to then settle out. And I think you're right. I think there's, all these people who were pushing. There's so many people that were pushing Biden to get out. They were not. Keep in mind, they could have done this, like you pointed out, months or years ago, and they didn't because she was there.
Yeah.
And they were forced, their hand was forced because of his decline and what happened at the debate. And there was a hope that, we're before the convention, we can still do this. And, she, to her credit, moved extremely fast to consolidate.
Well, she was ready. I go back to a lot of this was very much orchestrated.
It may have been orchestrated, but there's a lot of people who didn't think that she was their best choice. So they were, she was the insurance policy to keep Biden in.
She was prepared for this. I mean, everyone's now comparing this to an episode in the show Veep with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, where the president is not going to run for a second term.
He's not running.
She's like, I'm running. I'm running. And that's completely Kamala. At the same time, I heard a comparison to the movie Dave, where where now they're going to put a stand-in for Joe Biden
Yeah.
for the remainder of the term. They're going to
Well,
lock him in the in the family quarters of the White House and have somebody else come out who
I
looks a
mean,
lot like him.
until you said that you saw him come off of the helicopter today, I had questions about what was his actual state, but he is alive.
Well, he apparently he is alive, which is a good. I don't want to wish that on anybody, and certainly in his advanced years and early stages or mid stages of dementia, something like COVID, if it was COVID, which it was also reported by some folks like Charlie Kirk of all people.
I don't believe any of that at all.
But this was going around that there was a more of a medical emergency in Las Vegas than that was regularly reported. If it was COVID, and he got all he's all drugged up, ready to go. We'll see what happens. I think the most strategic mistake, though, going into the next 3 months, is Biden not resigning the presidency, because I think that still ties Kamala and Biden together. And whatever happens on the world stage, whatever happens domestically over the next, and there's going to be a lot that's going on. Our enemies will test us over the next several months. And the way, and his reaction and her reaction together is what they will be judged by. And it's going to give Trump a lot of ammunition.
That's true.
If he were to resign today, insert her into the presidency, which is not my first idea or choice, but then she has a clearer path.
If we're going to be consistent, 2 weeks ago we said that he needed to resign. If he was,
absolutely.
I mean, just from the standpoint of his mental acuity,
I'm glad he stepped down for his own health. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are complications to him resigning, and he might still, she might ascend the presidency before the end of the year. We don't know.
Yeah.
It makes it a little bit dicey on how she gets a vice president in place, because that's got to be approval by the House and the Senate. So, we'll see.
Yep, that's probably why they're not going to do it.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. So. But let me say this: and this is something that I learned from Jeff Flake, which I thought was very interesting. So
the ambassador to Turkey.
The ambassador to Turkey. So if people remember, so Jeff Flake was not a Trump person, right?
No.
So Trump gets elected in 2016. And the Trump people were immediately trying to figure out, what can we offer Jeff to get him out of the Senate? Because they were afraid that he was going to vote against all their, agenda, that he was going to vote against their nominees. I talked to him and said, this stuff's happening. He's like, look, I'm a believer in the advice and consent component of the Constitution when it comes to the presidential nominations. That's the president's job, is to that's his purview. And unless it's something egregious, his point was, if that's who the president wants, that's who the president gets, unless it's literally somebody who they figure out in the hearing process is, corrupt or whatever. And I thought, well, that's a very interesting and very important and very constitutional look at that. I thought I would learn a lot from that. So I would hope that if we get to the point where Biden resigns the presidency and Kamala becomes the president and she's in need of appointing a vice president, that the House and the Senate, particularly the House because it's Republican run, would be deferential to her decision, because that is the president's decision. I mean, unless it's somebody that they can show that is unfit for office, which I'm guessing she wouldn't pick somebody that was unfit for office, they should just let that happen. It shouldn't need to be a big fight. It certainly doesn't need to be, because that's when there's real, you're showing the world, we can have a process in place and it can be...
And it can work.
It can work.
Yeah.
It can work.
Well, that's wishful thinking.
Well, thanks, Chris.
I just don't see that happening right now. It should. I mean, I might be wrong. Strategically, it might be better for Biden to stay in, because it's just more of a mess.
That may be, because you know who would screw this up? I almost said the F word. Matt Gaetz. And I don't know if you
Well,
saw
Matt,
this little exchange on the convention floor.
Matt Gates, the guy with the face.
He had all the Botox during his speech at the RNC.
Oh yeah.
So he is trying to like needle Speaker McCarthy. McCarthy's on the floor. He's like, "Hey, you giving a speech? If you went up there, they'd boo you off the stage." And some guy says, "Hey, Gates, shut up. You don't have to be such an asshole." And Gates turns around. He's like, "I don't even know you." And the guy's like, "It doesn't matter who I am." And Gates, Gates goes from, and he runs away. Little pansy.
Well, I mean,
can't stand
he
that
can
guy.
run, but I don't think he's going to be able to hide the ethics investigation against him, and it's going to be.
Oh, the fact that he was
Nothing's gonna change
trafficking
there.
underage women across straight lines
Oh
and
my
paying them?
gosh.
Yeah.
That makes him a pedophile,
Yeah. Yeah.
even in Florida.
Yeah. Yeah.
To use a little line from Fletch.
Yeah.
That makes him a pedophile, even in Florida.
Even in Florida. All right. On that note, folks, we will be back. Well, we're going to both be gone next. Well, actually, you know what? We might do a remote hit.
Yeah, we should do a remote.
Because it'll
This
be
worked out great.
after the Republican primary here in Arizona, or after the primary here in Arizona, Democrat primary as well. So there's going to be plenty to talk about. Maybe because as I look at what the early ballot numbers returns are right now, it's slow. So there's going to be a lot of ballots that are dropped off on election day, which then have to be processed. So it's going to be days on some of these races. I'm guessing we won't know on election night. We won't know CD8 for the Republicans. We won't know CD1 for the Democrats. And there'll probably be some legislative races we don't know the results of. There might even be some county races here in Maricopa County we don't know the results of. And, God willing, we
Well,
won't
let's just
know.
hope our good friend Stephen Richter is doing his job rather than coming out in favor of Biden.
He'll be doing his job. I'm not worried about that.
Rather than showing his cards early.
Yeah. Well, he can't vote for Biden now. All righty. Have a great one, people.
Care.
Thanks,
God
everybody.
bless.
See ya.